folks, it's leondp from PropertyTime, your real estate agent in Roodepoort on the west end of Johannesburg. And with me today is Darryn Chaplin, all the way from the Jager attorneys, a well-established law firm specializing in conveyancing for the past 23 years, situated here in Roodepoort. Darryn, you've agreed on a very short notice to come and explain to us the property transfer process in a little bit more detail. And thank you very much for that.
No, thanks for having me, Leon.
Darryn, tell me, so you receive the sale agreement from an agent, and let's assume for all practical purposes that the suspensive conditions have been met. What happens now?
Okay, the first thing we're going to request is bond cancellation figures from the seller's mortgager, which would be the relevant bank. If there is no bond over the property, we'd request the title deed from the seller. Then we're going to make communication with the bond attorneys, or they're going to make communication with us to say they've received the bond, and we're going to request the guarantee requirements from them once we've received the cancellation figures from the bank. We're going to obtain FICA documents from both the seller and the buyer, request rate clearance figures from council, and then once we've got all that, we can then draft documents for signature, get the clients in to come and sign, request the guarantees from the bond attorneys. Once the clients have signed, purchasers will then pay the costs. We can then pay the rates to council to obtain the rates clearance certificate on behalf of the seller. We can submit transfer duty to SARS to obtain the transfer duty receipt. Obtain the guarantees from the bond attorneys, which we then forward off to the cancellation attorneys. And then once we've received all our relevant certificates, the rates clearance and the transfer duty and the electrical compliance certificates and so on, we're basically good to go into the deeds office. We're then going to double check with the bond attorneys. Have they received their proceed from the bank? Have the client signed with them? Have they got their proceed? And with the cancellation attorneys, have they received their consents from the banks that we can get into the deeds office?
Darryn, it's very clear that this is it's a complex process. But just to put it in perspective, my experience is this is an 8 to 12 week period. Am I correct saying that?
Leon, at the moment we're looking roughly 6 to 8 weeks, but every transfer is...
Yeah, you don't have two transactions, that's allowed.
No transactions the same, but roughly 6 to 8 weeks at the moment.
You have your exceptions of 21 days, etc., etc., yes.
We've then, once we're ready to go into the deeds office, bond attorneys are ready to go into the deeds office, cancellation attorneys are good to go, we lodge in the deeds office, and then the deeds office process takes roughly 7 to 10 working days.
Darryn, there are various costs involved in for both the seller and the purchaser before registration can even take place. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, Leon, correct. The purchaser would have the most costs. They're going to be paying two sets of costs, one to the transferring attorney and one to the bond attorneys. The bond attorneys registering the bond in the deeds office, so they pay the bond registration costs, and then the transfer costs to the transferring attorneys. In those transfer costs would be your transfer fees through to the attorneys, the transfer duty applicable, which is payable to SARS.
Can I just get in there? The transfer duty payable by the seller, the first 900,000 rand is exempted.
The first 900,000 is exempted, it's payable by the purchaser. After that it works on a sliding scale.
Correct.
Then the purchaser will also be liable for the deeds office fees, postage and petties, the FICA fees, and then depending on the property, provision for levies or homeowners association if applicable.
Yeah, that will all depend on the property description.
Correct. Then the seller would be liable for the bond cancellation if they've still got a bond over the property, the bond cancellation attorney fee to settle the bond in the deeds office.
I just want to jump in here quickly, Darryn. The seller, if there's a mortgage outstanding, will have a bond cancellation fee. His financial institution will appoint an attorney.
Correct.
Known as the bond attorney.
Bond cancellation
Bond cancellation attorney. On the purchaser side, the financial institution granting the loan in their favour, they will appoint an attorney, and they're known as the bond attorney. Whereas the seller will appoint the transferring attorney who will facilitate the actual transfer.
Correct. Then the other costs which the seller would need to look out for would be your agent's commission, the relevant property certificates such as your electrical compliance certificate, your gas certificate, your fencing certificate, your entomologist certificate, which is applicable mainly in the Western Cape and the KwaZulu-Natal, and then your plumbing certificate, which is only in Cape Town. The rates clearance certificate we would then also obtain from council. We pay that on behalf of the seller. That's usually for a couple of months.
Normally 3 months or so?
3 to 5 months.
It's a provisional amount.
It's a provision. There will be a refund due back to the seller from council.
So yeah, the seller will be in credit up until registration, and then after registration they apply for the refund.
Correct.
through their normal channels.
Correct. And then there'd also be your levy and your homeowners association clearance figures there.
That normally you do a discretional split there, if I'm correct.
Dependent on the body corporate. Each body corporate operates differently, so some have got specific requirements. We've got to work according to their specific requirements. Then there's also a FICA fee, which will be applicable, and then capital gains tax, depending on the property. But Leon, capital gains tax, that's a subject for another video, not for this video.
I'm sure we're going to get a specialist in and to discuss it and help us. Darryn is quite involved. Again, I now understand how you keep yourself busy every day. The process is involved and complex. And again, I thank you very much for taking the time to come and explain it to us. It's Leon from PropertyTime. I am going to have Darryn's email address and contact details from the Jager attorneys at the bottom. And you're more than welcome to contact him should you have any questions relating transfers or any questions related to the subject. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.